It was my sophomore year at college when I first heard about the library's fourth floor. Students whispered about it, some in jest, others with a seriousness that made you pause. They said it was cursed, that those who studied there late into the night often went missing, never to be seen again. I laughed it off as nothing more than an urban legend, a story concocted to scare freshmen. But as midterms approached, I found myself desperate for a quiet place to study. The library's fourth floor was always deserted, so I thought, why not? The first few nights were uneventful, but on the third night, as the clock struck midnight, I began to hear a faint scratching sound. It seemed to come from the bookshelves, rhythmic and persistent. I tried to ignore it, but it grew louder, more insistent. Curiosity overcame my fear, and I followed the sound to a secluded corner of the floor. There, between two bookcases, was a door I had never noticed before. It was old wooden and looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The scratching was louder here, as if something, or someone, was trying to get out. I reached for the handle, my hands trembling. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The air was musty, and I could barely see a thing. I took out my phone, using it as a makeshift torch, and began to descend. The staircase seemed to go on forever, the scratching growing louder with each step. At the bottom, I found myself in a dimly lit room filled with old furniture covered in dust sheets. In the center of the room was a large, ornate mirror. The scratching was coming from behind it. I approached, heart pounding, and peered behind the mirror. There, etched into the wall, were countless names, dates, and desperate messages begging for help. I stumbled back in horror, realizing the truth of the legend. The fourth floor wasn't cursed. It was a prison, trapping the souls of those who had vanished. I turned to leave, but the door had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. Panic set in as I realized I was now one of them. Another name to be etched into the wall. Another soul lost to the library's fourth floor. Trapped in the room with no apparent exit, my mind raced for a solution. The names on the wall seemed to stare back at me, a silent audience to my panic. I refused to become just another forgotten story. I approached the mirror again, this time examining it closely. It was then I noticed something peculiar, a faint glow emanating from the edges. I touched the mirror, half expecting my hand to pass through, but it was solid. The glow, however, grew brighter with my touch. I pressed harder, and to my astonishment, the mirror began to slide aside, revealing a hidden passage. A sliver of hope sparked within me as I stepped through. The passage led to a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the library. I followed them, guided by the faint glow that seemed to pulsate in rhythm with my heartbeat. After what felt like hours, I emerged into the night air. I was on the other side of the campus, far from the library. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft light over the grounds. I looked back at the library, its fourth floor ominously quiet. I knew then that I had to share my story, to warn others of the dangers that lurked within. But who would believe such a tale? I decided to document everything, to gather evidence of the hidden passages and the names on the wall. As I write this, I can't help but wonder about the others, the ones who didn't find the passage, who didn't make it out. Their stories deserve to be told, their names remembered. I may have escaped the library's grasp, but I'm not free of its hold on me. I can still hear the scratching sometimes, late at night, a reminder of the night I came face to face with the unknown. And so my warning to you is this: beware the library's fourth floor. If you must venture there, keep an eye on the clock. And whatever you do, don't ignore the scratching. Trapped in the room with no apparent exit, my mind raced for a solution. The names on the wall seemed to stare back at me, a silent audience to my panic. I refused to become just another forgotten story. I approached the mirror again, this time examining it closely. It was then I noticed something peculiar, a faint glow emanating from the edges. I touched the mirror, half expecting my hand to pass through, but it was solid. The glow, however, grew brighter with my touch. I pressed harder, and to my astonishment, the mirror began to slide aside, revealing a hidden passage. A sliver of hope sparked within me as I stepped through. The passage led to a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the library. I followed them, guided by the faint glow that seemed to pulsate in rhythm with my heartbeat. After what felt like hours, I emerged into the night air. I was on the other side of the campus, far from the library. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft light over the grounds. I looked back at the library, its fourth floor ominously quiet. I knew then that I had to share my story, to warn others of the dangers that lurked within. But who would believe such a tale? I decided to document everything, to gather evidence of the hidden passages and the names on the wall. As I write this, I can't help but wonder about the others, the ones who didn't find the passage, who didn't make it out. Their stories deserve to be told, their names remembered. I may have escaped the library's grasp, but I'm not free of its hold on me. I can still hear the scratching sometimes, late at night, a reminder of the night I came face to face with the unknown. And so my warning to you is this: beware the library's fourth floor. If you must venture there, keep an eye on the clock, and wherever you do, don't ignore the scratching. I always thought college would be the place for new beginnings, a haven for learning and growth. Little did I know it would also be the place where I'd encounter the most chilling experience of my life. It started off as a whisper or rumor among students about the old dormitory on campus, the one that had been closed off for years due to a mysterious incident. They said it was haunted, that late at night you could hear the echoes of someone crying in the halls. I laughed it off. Those stories were for kids, after all. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. Armed with nothing but my phone's flashlight, I decided to explore the forbidden building. The air was thick with dust and the silence was oppressive. As I wandered the dark, empty corridors, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. It was when I reached the end of the hallway that I heard it. A soft sobbing, so sorrowful it made my blood run cold. I turned the corner, and there, in the dim light of my phone, was the silhouette of someone sitting on the floor. I approached, my heart pounding in my chest, and asked if they were all right. The figure turned its head towards me, and in the pale light, I saw its face, or rather the lack of one. Where features should have been, there was nothing but a smooth, blank surface. I stumbled backward, my scream caught in my throat, as the figure rose to its feet and started moving towards me with an unnatural, jerky gait. I didn't stick around to see what it wanted. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping, until I burst out into the safety of the moonlit campus. The next day, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light and shadows. But deep down, I knew what I saw was real. And the most disturbing part? When I described the location to a campus security guard, he went pale and told me that room had been sealed off for decades, ever since a student without any family had taken their own life there, and nobody had found them for weeks. The encounter left me shaken, questioning the varied fabric of reality. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was filled with nightmares of faceless figures in endless corridors. I couldn't shape the image of the entity with no face, and a part of me needed answers. I began to research the history of the dormitory, digging through old campus records and newspaper archives. What I found was a pattern of tragedy that seemed to center around the room where I had my encounter. Decades ago, the dormitory had been the pride of the college, home to students full of dreams and aspirations. But over the years, a series of unexplained incidents had cast a shadow over it. Students reported strange occurrences, items going missing, inexplicable cold spots, and that same heart-wrenching sobbing in the night. The administration tried to downplay the events, attributing them to pranks or the overactive imaginations of stressed students. But the stories persisted, and the room remained sealed off, a silent testament to the college's dark past. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I reached out to alumni who had lived in the dormitory. Their stories were all too similar tales of unease and discomfort, of feeling like they were never truly alone in their rooms. One alumnus in particular spoke of a night when he had seen a shadowy figure standing over his bed, watching him sleep. He had transferred out of the dormitory the very next day. The more I learned, the more I felt drawn to the room. It was as if the sorrow that permeated its walls was calling out to me, begging to be understood. Against my better judgment, I decided to return to the dormitory. This time I brought a camera, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. As I approached the sealed door, the air grew colder, and a familiar sobbing filled the halls. I pressed record and slowly opened the door. What I saw inside was beyond comprehension. The room was exactly as it would have been all those years ago, untouched by time. Papers were strewn about, a half-written letter lay on the desk, and on the bed, a figure lay curled up, its body racked with sobs. I approached cautiously, my heart racing. The figure looked up, and I saw its face, not blank as before, but twisted in an expression of eternal anguish. It reached out to me, and I heard a voice, clear as day, help me. I stumbled backward, the camera falling from my grasp. I ran from the room, the building, the campus, not stopping, until I reached the safety of my own home. The footage from the camera was gone, erased as if it had never been. But the memory of that face, that plea for help, remains etched in my mind. I still don't have the answers. Maybe I never will. But one thing is certain. The old dormitory holds a secret, a pain so profound that it transcends death itself. And I, for one, will never set foot in that building again. I never believed the old campus legends of Hawthorne College, dismissing them as mere tales to scare freshmen. That was until I encountered the truth hidden within the ivy-clad walls, the oldest dormitory on campus. It was a night like any other, with the moon casting a pale glow over the quiet grounds. My roommate had left for the weekend, and I was alone, immersed in my studies. The clock struck midnight when I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a hiss, coming from the hallway outside my door. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice betraying a hint of nervousness. No answer, just the sound of my own heartbeat, now drumming in my ears. I opened the door to an empty corridor, the lights flickering, as if struggling to maintain their feeble hold against the darkness. I should have gone back inside, locked the door, and tried to sleep. But curiosity led me forward, following the whispers that seemed to be calling my name. They led me to the end of the hall, to a door I had passed countless times but never entered. The door to the old library, long abandoned and sealed with chains. The whispers grew louder, urging me on. Without knowing how, I found myself inside the library. The air was thick with dust, and the only light came from the moon shining through the broken windows. The books were scattered, their pages torn, and yellowed with age. And then I saw her, a figure in white, her back to me, standing in the center of the room. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She turned slowly, and I could see her face, pale and sorrowful. "I am the keeper of stories," she said, her voice echoing off the walls. "The stories that were forgotten, the stories that must not be forgotten." She gestured to the books around us, and as I looked closer, I realized they weren't just books. They were diaries, journals of students who had come before me. Their fears and secrets poured onto the pages. The keeper spoke again, "Read and remember, for these stories are now yours to carry." I reached for a diary, its cover worn and faded. The first entry was dated over a century ago, and as I read, the words seemed to come alive, painting a picture of a college very different from the one I knew. A college with a history of unexplained disappearances, of shadows that moved on their own, of a presence that lingered in the very walls. I looked up, the figure was gone. The whispers had stopped. I was alone with the stories of the past, a chill running down my spine as I realized the truth. The legends were real, and I was now part of them. The silence of the library was suffocating, the weight of a century's worth of untold stories pressing down on me. I clutched the diary tightly, its leather cover cracked and brittle under my fingers. The entries spoke of love, loss, and fear, emotions that transcended time and echoed through the halls of Hawthorne College. As I turned the pages, the moonlight seemed to grow stronger, illuminating words that began to blur and shift before my eyes. The diary was no longer just a collection of pages. It was a gateway, a bridge to the past that beckoned me to step through. I found myself drawn into the memories of a student from 1894, a young woman named Eliza who wrote of strange occurrences in the dormitory. Objects moving on their own, whispers in the night, and a shadowy figure that watched in the corners of her room. Her words painted a vivid picture of a college gripped by an unseen force, a malevolent presence that fed on the fears of its inhabitants. Eliza's entries grew more frantic as the days passed, her writing becoming a desperate plea for help that I knew would never come. The diary ended abruptly, the final page torn out, leaving only the ragged edges behind. I looked up from the book, my heart racing, and that's when I heard it, a soft sobbing coming from the shadows. I followed the sound, my footsteps echoing in the empty library, until I reached the far corner where a dim figure huddled against the wall. It was Eliza, her spectral form barely visible in the light, her tears a silent testament to her eternal sorrow. "Why are you crying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They didn't believe me," she replied, her voice a hollow echo of despair. "They said I was imagining things, but I wasn't. It was real, all of it." I knelt beside her, the chill of her presence seeping into my bones. "What was real? Tell me, Eliza." "The darkness," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "It lives here in the walls, in the very soul of this place. It took them, one by one, until I was alone." Her gaze met mine, and in that moment I understood the true horror of Hawthorne College. It wasn't the legends or the ghost stories that haunted the campus. It was the darkness itself, an ancient evil that had claimed the lives of countless students over the years. Eliza's form began to fade, her final words a chilling warning. "Beware the darkness, for it will come for you too." And then she was gone, leaving me alone in the library with the diary and the echoes of the past. I left the building, the first light of dawn casting long shadows across the campus. I never spoke of what happened that night, but I never forgot Eliza's words. Hawthorne College may seem like just another institution of learning, but beneath its scholarly veneer lies a darkness that watches and waits, ready to claim its next victim.